So welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, believe it or not, chapter 46, my friends. We have just 9, is it 9? It's 4 and 3, 7. It's 7 chapters left until the end of the Tanya, until we finish the whole Tanya.
Unbelievable.
I was recently talking to Gitti about what we have to do. We have to figure out something to make like a whole conclusion for the whole Tanya. To do like a whole siyum, yeah. We'll do something nice. Maybe we'll do something in my house. Maybe we'll see. But welcome to Jewish Mysticism, chapter 46. Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 46. The title of today's lesson is How to Mirror God's Love. And in the Practical Tanya by Rabbi Chaim Miller, it can be found on page 589. This evening's class is dedicated in the loving memory of Mrs. Lori Gilbert K., Leah Bat Reuven, Hashem Yikom Dama, as we always say, may God avenge her blood, who was murdered so ruthlessly this past Shabbat at Chabad of Poway in the terrible atrocities. And to anybody who's watching online, if I can encourage you to please join us in Shul this Shabbos, as we are having what they're calling Shir Shabbat, to fight hatred with love, to pack the shuls. They wanted to scare us out of being in Shul this Shabbat, so we're going to pack them way more than they usually are to show them that Jews are not afraid in the face of evil. And in the past 5 chapters, where we've been discussing reverence and love, one of the main topics has been, anybody? How do we attain love? What's the best way? What's the most thorough way? Has the Tanya been explaining to us how to attain love?
Mitzvot. Meditation.
Very good. Meditation, right? We've heard a lot about meditation. We discussed meditations for this direction, meditations for that direction, different ways, different levels, deeper love, more shallow love. All comes through meditation. The more we meditate about God, God's love for us, the whole shebang, it evokes a love within us. This week, the Alter Rebbe is going to take a step back. He says, what's about somebody who this type of love, this type of intense effort of working on loving God through meditation, in other words, which takes intense focus, as we know, right? We have to focus on one particular aspect of it and think about it from all different angles, and the more you think about it, the more it'll internalize itself, and then eventually it'll give birth to a love. What if somebody's not holding there? Is there like a simpler, like a step one, like a, not lazier, not necessarily that he's lazier, but he's just not holding at a spiritual level where he can meditate, or where he can meditate for such a long time, or where he can meditate at such a degree? So the Alter Rebbe's answer is that yes, there is. An easier step to love is reflection. Is just being conscious of something. It's just realizing something, right? The word reflection, realization, whatever you want to call it. The Alter Rebbe's words are where is it? Shaveh l'chal nefesh. Right? Derech yashar lifnei ish shaveh l'chal nefesh. It's a straight path, a straightforward path, which is shaveh l'chal nefesh means it's equal for all people, for all souls. No matter who you are, no matter how much you've managed to meditate before in the past, or anything like that, you can attain this level by the simple fact of recognizing and reflecting on a certain point. And what is that? So the Alter Rebbe quotes from Proverbs, where Proverbs uses the term that as a face reflects a face in the water, so does the heart of man reflect to man. What does that mean? Right? We're all familiar that if you walk to the edge of the water, whether it's this bottle of water right here, or whether it's a lake, whether it's a well, whether it's a pail, it doesn't make a difference. If there's water, there is a reflection. Right? So just as when a person sticks his face in the direction, right? But the term that's used in Proverbs is water. I guess mirrors weren't as common then. Maybe it was before the invention of mirrors. Who knows? Right? Proverbs is a while ago. I don't know. When were mirrors invented? That's an interesting question. So just as every time a face looks at the water, there's automatically a reflection back, says Proverbs, that when a man has an emotion towards another person, when a human being has an emotion towards another human being, there is a reflection of that emotion back to him. I should mention, parenthetically, that this is the Tanya's interpretation of this verse. Another interpretation of this verse is that it is appropriate to have the reflecting emotion. Everybody catch the difference? Not that it's natural, but that let me point it out inside the book. On page 591, right before section 2. It's possible to interpret the verse in Proverbs as an ethical lesson. If someone is nice to you, make the effort to be nice back, which is obviously also a very valid lesson. However, the Tanya interprets the verse not as an ethical lesson, but as psychological reality. This is the natural behavior pattern of all people, the Alter Rebbe says. If someone is nice to you, naturally and inevitably, you will want to be nice back. And I should mention that we see this actually in human, in human interactions one with another, right? As a matter of fact, one of the things that you'll find, you see this you see this in real life, unfortunately, but you definitely see this like in movies or in books, when they want to exaggerate how much someone else, or emphasize how much one person hated another person, they would say, he never wanted to take any favors from him, right? I don't want to take a favor from you, right? Someone will hate someone else and say, I don't want to take a favor from you. Why can't you take a favor from me and continue to hate me, right? Why is that such a big deal? Why? Because it's hard to continue to hate somebody when they do something good for you. Naturally, even if you continue to hate them,
I don't want to reflect them back.
In other words, I don't want to naturally, because I know that if he does something good to me, I will naturally, not I'm supposed to, but I will naturally, automatically have a reflection of some goodwill to him. And I don't want to have that because I hate him, so therefore I won't do it. Has anybody ever heard such a concept before? Right? Terrible behavior. Right?
Don't want it to be reflected in me.
But the point here that I'm making, right? The point that I'm making is that there's there's something that we see that it's something about human beings that naturally, if somebody does something good for us, we feel like we need to be good back to them. Right? Like we can't help it almost. Right? So says the Alter Rebbe, this is true about any two human beings. Right? If I say a nice thing to Jeff is going to want to say something nice back to me. Right? If I love Jeff always says nice things. It's true. But certainly if I say something, for sure he'll want to say something nice back. How much more so, right? This is between me and Jeff, we're equals. But imagine if, and the Alter Rebbe begins to paint the picture here, and he goes into graphic detail, and we'll soon into detailed, really real. He really fleshes out this parable, and in a moment we'll see why. The Alter Rebbe explains. Or the Alter Rebbe paints a picture. He says, imagine if a king, right? And I always tell modern audiences, by king we don't mean, the king of Morocco today or the king of Jordan or whatever it is. A real king from back in the day, right? That was exalted and from a majestic family and whatever, right? Literally, he needed the peasant on the street like he needed, the sole of his shoe. Literally nothing. And imagine if the king was so exalted and he has he has a big palace, and in his palace there's chamber after chamber after chamber, and he has the inner chamber, right? Imagine if the king decides one day to go out into the street and find one of the lowliest, regular, simple people. And he begins to be makar of him. He begins to bring him close, to forge a relationship with him. And the peasant is not even sure what to do with himself, right? He begins to bring him close and closer and closer. He brings him into the palace. And he brings him into one room. He brings him into another room, another chamber. He brings him all the way into his inner sanctum. And there he literally begins to be with him. He hugs him and he kisses him. Would it even be possible for this low person, a servant or a simple person, whatever it is, right, not to reflect back the love that the king is showing to him that he shouldn't show back to the king? This is true about two regular human beings. Imagine if somebody from such a high, lofty position chooses to be so close to somebody down here below. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is true about our relationship with God. First of all, and to the umpteenth level. First of all, on a historic level, right? From a philosophical perspective, we've mentioned that God fills the entire universe, right? And he has chambers upon chambers up in heaven that have nothing to do with the universe and way beyond the universe, and his levels and his unlimitedness know no bounds, right? Etc. And so God is clearly, like I said, to the umpteenth level, more exalted than a king is from a simple man, is God from us, or from this physical universe, right? And God is unlimited, and God is so high, so God is so exalted. And yet we're told that the angels ask, Aye mekom kevodo. Right? The angels ask, where can God's glory be found? What is glory? Right? So the answer is, kevodo male olam. His glory fills the earth. The Medrash explains, I believe it's the Medrash, hold on one second. Let me just double check that. Isaiah, I apologize. Isaiah, hold on one second. The verse is from Isaiah. Anyways, that who is God's glory that's filling the entire earth? It's explained that that's the Jewish people. The Jewish people is where God can be found. And we know this historically, right? Where were the Jewish people? In Egypt. Egypt, what?
595.
Yeah, 595. That's where we are. We're on page 595. Where are the Jewish people? I'm sorry, where are the Jewish people taken from? The Jewish people were in Egypt. And the Torah explains to us that Egypt at that time was called Ervat Haaretz, which meant literally the lowest and most coarse place, like society that there could have been in this world. And God took the Jewish people from there, right, as we know, and we just read this Passover in the Haggadah, right? Lo al yedei malach, v'lo al yedei saraf, right? Not through this type of angel, or through that type of angel, or through this type of messenger, but God himself came down and took us out. Literally like the king coming and taking this simple man. And he took us out of Egypt. Why did he take us? Why did he take us? To take us 40 days through the desert, 49 days through the desert, 40 years through the desert, but 49 days till Sinai, and to bring us literally as close as he can to us. And what did he do at Sinai? He gave us the Torah, which, as we've mentioned before, the Torah is considered God's kiss. And he gave us the mitzvot, which as we've learned before in previous chapters, I think it was last week or 2 weeks, last chapter or 2 chapters ago, I know we're a little off on the weeks because of the Passover break, that the mitzvot referred to God's hug. And he literally embraced us as a people and brought us closer and closer and closer to him. Were we deserving of it? Certainly not. Yes?
Is it the mitzvah that is like God's hug, or is it the giving of the mitzvah that is like?
No. The mitzvah itself is God's hug. I may have made a mistake in the head, though. Let's see.
And he hugged us by giving us the mitzvah, which are...
By giving us the mitzvah, which are likened to a hug. Okay, that might not be so clear. But no, by doing a mitzvah, it's like a hug from God. As we mentioned earlier, here he gets into slight detail. He starts to talk about the mitzvah, how the mitzvah are divided into 3 categories, and those 3 categories support the world, etc. But earlier on, he's explained that by doing a mitzvah, which is God's will, it's literally like embracing God, because we're doing something with our bodies, with our physical bodies. We're doing something which is the will of God. And by God, his will and him are not separate. They're one thing. So we're literally embracing God by doing a mitzvah. And Torah, we've discussed at length, even in chapter 5, 41 chapters ago, believe it or not, we discussed how learning Torah is like you're becoming one with God, and God is becoming one with you, literally like a kiss, right? Like when 2 people kiss, and they're becoming one.
I want to say something.
Go ahead.
Talking about the reflection.
We're not done that point. We're still in the process of that point. But go ahead.
In another way of seeing it, since God is all and there's nothing but God, and we made in His image, we are the reflection of God. So it's as if God looks in the mirror and sees us. So we have no choice but to return to God the love that He loves us.
So this is a perfect segue. I just want to make one more point, and then we'll you know what? We'll do it in opposite order. Okay? So yes, 100%. This is the point we're making. That when God does that, when God Elazar. No, it's fine. He's out already. Okay, no problem. I think he was looking for a key to the office. I have one. All right. So, when God did that, when God, as the king, right, who was literally exalted to who knows how many levels, right, above the Jewish people, and he chose to take the Jewish people to bring us closer and closer and closer to him. So much so as to give us an opportunity to hug him and to kiss him. When Hashem did that, what happened? God gave us an opportunity to become one with him. Gave us an opportunity to become one with him. And this is one of the similarities that's always said why the Jewish people are considered married to God. Right? Why one of the terms that's used with regards to when a man and his wife are together is v'hayu lebasar echad, that they become one flesh. Similarly, when a Jew does Torah and mitzvot, he literally becomes one with God. Where do we see this? One of the places that we see this is when we make a blessing on a mitzvah, right? So every mitzvah that we do, we make a blessing, right? We put on tefillin, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, blessed is He who sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us to put on tefillin. We light Shabbat candles, right? Blessed is He who sanctified us with His commandments, commanded us to light Shabbat candles, right? Asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav. What is this word kiddeshanu? Sanctified us. He sanctified us. So it's interesting. Where else do we find the word sanctified besides for by a mitzvah? Where else do we find the word sanctified? You know where?
Sacred.
By marriage. When a man marries a woman, what does he say? He says, Harei at mekudeshet li. You are sanctified to me. Right? Why is that? Because when a person sanctifies something to himself, or one person sanctifies another person to themselves, essentially what they're saying is, you're separated from the rest of the world. In other words, you're no longer associated with the rest of the world, you're only associated with me. Similarly, when we do a mitzvah, we are stressing that level of connection that we have with God. God sanctified us with His Torah, with His commandments. In other words, He separated the entire world and brought us closer to Him. And it made this connection between us and Him. But on a much deeper level, God gives us an opportunity to be on His wavelength, to gain sort of a glimmer of godliness that we should be like God. And this is the point that you were making. In other words, He gives us the opportunity to be not just a reflection, but literally to be godliness, to tap into God in us. We are essentially just a reflection of God. He gives us an opportunity to tap into that and to actually be like Him. Right?
He created us in that manner.
Similar to the parable where the king brings this low person or simple person into his inner sanctum, certainly when he brings him in, he's treating him like an equal. Because he's treating him like an equal, he's now elevated that person almost to the status and to the level and by bringing him into the same room means he's deserving of being in the same room as the king. So him and the king share something in common. Similarly, when we do a mitzvah, when we learn Torah, when we do a mitzvah, what happens is we literally become like God. We tap into godliness. In that moment, the Jew is endowed with the glimmer of God's holiness. And that's where that other translation of the word kedusha, which is separation, comes in. Because when a Jew does do a mitzvah, he is essentially being mekadesh himself. He is sanctifying himself. He is separating himself from the rest of the world. What is he doing? Of course, we all live in this world. And we can choose to be involved in the material world, or we can choose to separate ourselves from it and connect to God. Right? To say no, so to speak, to the physical world, to materialistic pursuits, and say, I want to be one with spirituality. I want to be one with God, one with the divine. And this is why, let me just finish this. But this is why, in the presence of a person doing a mitzvah, we're told, it doesn't make a difference what type of person it is. It can be the biggest sinner in the world. And this is the only mitzvah that he's doing in his entire life. But if he's doing a mitzvah right now, we're commanded to stand in his presence. Why? Because in that moment, he is godly. In that moment, with that action, he is becoming one with God. Elazar,
Yes.
are you trying to get into the office?
No, I know where the keys are.
You're good. Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much. Don't want to disturb you.
No problem. So in that moment, he's and therefore, it's not him, but the act that he's doing demands respect, and demands that we stand before him, demands that we recognize that this is a moment of godliness. Yes.
So, but God created everybody in the world, not just us, not just Jews.
Okay.
So, do we say that like the non-Jew did not reciprocate to God? Like they are not...
First of all, non-Jews have a different way of connecting to God than do Jews, 100%.
Because a non-Jew can love God the same way.
Right, 100%. I'm trying to answer your question without getting into like a whole conversation about the difference between Jews and non-Jews, because this is beyond the scope of today's lesson, and certainly not the topic of today's lesson. For the purposes of this conversation, let's look at it this way. A non-Jew has mitzvot as well, right? 7 of them,
mitzvot.
right? Let's say that through that mitzvah, he can have a similar connection to God. It's not the same, and that's a conversation for a different time.
Okay.
Is that fair enough? I think I addressed the point. I know I didn't fully talk about
yes,
that.
but sometimes I think about even other religions.
100%.
They can be very high,
First of all,
people, but
many other
they
religions,
speak different.
many other religions, by the very fact that they follow, if they follow everything from their religion, they are doing the 7 mitzvot that the Torah commands non-Jews to do. And that's a tremendous connection with it. But let's resume this conversation later. Okay, because otherwise I know this.
No, that's okay.
I know this topic. This could be a real tangent, and we could spend a lot of time on this. Okay, so if all this is going on, if I'm studying Torah, I'm doing mitzvot, and I'm having this intense connection with God, so much so that it's compared to intimacy between a man and his wife, they're becoming one. I'm becoming one with God. I'm learning Torah. So why did I feel it? Why did I feel it? Jeff, have you put on tefillin before?
Yes.
Yeah. You felt like you were hugging and kissing God?
Not really.
Not really. Maybe you felt a little more holy. You felt like a good Jew. You're doing the right thing. Maybe you needed to pray for something. You felt a little more spiritual. Hugging and kissing God. This intense. What is going on? Where is the disconnect? Where is the disconnect? Right? You've lit Shabbat candles before?
Of course.
Every time you feel like literally, no, not every time. Right? Okay, good. I'm just making sure everybody in the room is a healthy, regular human beings like me. I don't know. Maybe some of you are tzaddikim. I don't know. What do I know? So this was actually Asaf's lament. Asaf has Asaf. We're actually coming close to Shavuot now. If any of you were there last year, I gave a class on Tehillim, on Psalms and the origin of Psalms and all the different composers, because we like to always say that King David compiled it. He compiled it, but he didn't necessarily compose everything there. Most of them he authored, but many of them not. It's called after his name, but many of them he did not compile. He did not compose. And one of the composers was Asaf, like we say sometimes, Mizmor LaAsaf, right? So in one of his things, I want to read it in Hebrew. 1 second. In one of his psalms, he says, "Vani bar." Where is it? On page 602, he says, "Vani bar v'lo eda behemot hayiti imach vani tamid imach." Asaf says, I was a fool. It says Psalm 73. I was a fool without das. I behaved like animals towards you, yet I was always with you. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is referring to a Jew or to a human being who is serving God in this world, right? And is having this deep, intimate connection with God. But what is he lacking? Dat. He's lacking that third one of the 10 attributes, the connection. Why? The Rambam Maimonides writes in his guide to the Perplexed, and we'll read it together in the English, about how the material world, we're on page 601, we're going to go back to it, at the bottom of page 601, how material pursuits and our physical bodies and our physical necessities here in this world cause us to be disconnected from the reality that's actually going on in our lives. In other words, it allows us somehow, or allows a bad word, it does not allow us to be in tune with what is going on with us on a spiritual level. This doesn't change the facts on the ground. This just doesn't change the fact that while we're in a physical body and we need to use the restroom, we need to go to sleep, and we need to sleep and eat, and all the physical things that we need to do, right? While all that's going on, there can be spiritual things going on as well. Why don't we have the connection to it? Why are we not in tune with it? That's because of our materialistic side of us. It forms this disconnect and allows for both to be going on at the same time. You want to read for us?
Well,
On the bottom of page 601, we're quoting from Maimonides in the Guide to the Perplexed. The notion of physical matter posing a veil which obstructs the soul from seeing divine revelation was taught by Rambam in his Guide for the Perplexed. Bottom of 601. All the way to the bottom. All the way to the bottom. Matter
Matter is a strong veil, preventing the apprehension of that which is separate from matter.
This is a quote
as
from
it
Maimonides.
truly is. It does this even if it is the noblest and purest matter. I mean to say, even if it is the matter of the heavenly sphere. All the more so is this true for the dark and turbid matter that is ours. Thank you. Hence, whenever our intellect aspires to apprehend God or one of the separate intellects, there will be this great veil interposed between the two.
There's this veil, says the Rambam. There's this disconnect. There's this blurriness, this whatever you want to call it, but there's something that doesn't allow us. He says that is true for any matter. Matter is the word he uses for the material world, right? For physical, for something that's not godly, let's call it, for something that opposes godliness, right? That's saying that it is something, right? Something that gets in tune with it's the dualistic perspective, right? Saying that there's God and then there's me. Whatever it is. He says this is true for any matter. Even the holiest object in the world. Go beyond this world, beyond this physical world, to worlds that are less physical than ours. If they are separate, so to speak, even though that's obviously not possible, from God, then they are disconnecting from God to a certain degree. And that causes them to be unable to perceive, to have that dot, to have that consciousness of godliness and of spirituality. This is true even about the heavenly spheres, he says, which are only slightly physical. But certainly with regards to our coarse, physical, material world, what we like to call the real world, right? Isn't that an objection of terms, right? Certainly in this world, because we are forced to live in this world, therefore we don't feel it. We're not conscious of it. And that's why Asaf says, "Vani bar velo eda." I was like empty. I didn't have any doubt. I didn't have any consciousness of it. Behemot hayiti, I was like an animal. Like an animal who has no consciousness of what he's walking on, right? There's an animal, when he walks over, a cow is walking along, right? He knows if he's walking on grass, on cement, on a human being, on another animal, on a banana. It doesn't know the difference. It tramples. It's not even conscious, right? Similarly with us, with regard to spirituality, that's our connection with spirituality, because of our material. Now, this is not necessarily something to be so nervous about. This is the way God created the world. It's not our fault. He created us as human beings. Right? There's many things that are our fault. Let's not take this too. Why should this not bother you? Why shouldn't it bother you? Because it doesn't change the facts. The Torah tells us this is not the facts, and that's why the last words in Asaf's lament are what? Vani tamidimach. Despite the fact that I'm like an animal, despite the fact that I have no da'at, despite the fact that I am not conscious of the fact that there's so many spiritual things going on within me every time I learn Torah or do a mitzvah. Vani tamidimach. But I am constantly with you. I'm consistently with you. I'm connected to you, and I can continue to be connected to you, and I can have these deep connections. I can kiss you and hug you, meaning God, right? And I can have these deep, intimate connections. And I even though I don't always feel it, I should be aware of the fact that these things are happening. Why? Why is it not such a big deal? Why is it not such a big deal that I don't feel I'm not in tune with it? Because the Alter Rebbe reminds us, even those that are in tune with it, right? Let's talk the biggest tzaddik. He has amazing da'at, he has amazing consciousness and presence of mind, of knowing, and he removed himself from the physical world, from the material world, to such a degree that he really realizes and comprehends and is in tune with the fact that godliness is here and he's doing a mitzvah and what he's doing, etc. Right? Sometimes you see these big tzaddikim, when the Rebbe would do a mitzvah, it didn't look the way I did a mitzvah. Right? A whole different level. He was in tune with what was going on. But the Alter Rebbe reminds us that even when this highest tzaddik, or any, somebody who's super in tune, even when they do a mitzvah, their consciousness is nothing compared to the real consciousness. Right? The real value of a mitzvah, the real value of Torah, only God knows. Of course, it is God. Right? It is that connection with God. As a result, he says, so we have a little less, a little more. It's all talking about just whether you're conscious of it or not. The facts on the ground are still the same. The factual relationship with God, the relationship that we have with God, that me or the biggest tzaddik have, is exactly the same in terms of this mitzvah that I'm doing is like an intimate moment with God.
Even if we don't know it, we are always one with God.
Exactly. Even if we're not conscious of it. Well, always when we do a mitzvah. Right? When we do a mitzvah.
If we do mitzvah, we feel it.
No. His point is that when you do a mitzvah, you're elevated to a different level of godliness. You're really getting into godliness. You might not feel it, but you are elevating to a higher level of godliness, into an intimate connection. Even though you're doing it mechanically, even though you're doing... Now, we already know that what we've been doing for the past 5 chapters is talking about the fact that mechanically is one level, and if you want to feel it, there's a whole other level. But that was a discussion a couple weeks ago. And so there's a lesson we take from this week's lesson, at least for me. It's the power that there is in this. He's literally comparing it like to a relationship between spouses, right? Just as two spouses, v'hayu lebasar echad, when they are together, they become like one flesh. We can be like that with God through doing a mitzvah and through learning Torah.
In fact,
and with this, we'll conclude Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 46, how to mirror God's love. This was a little bit of an easier way of developing a love for God by reflecting on God's love. That will reflecting on God's love for us, which can then arouse a love in us back towards Him.